They said she didn't belong there, that she was just a tag-along technician, too old for combat drills and too quiet to command presence, until the dust settled and the shadows cleared. And the only reason any of them were still breathing was because she never left her post. If you agree that respect must be earned with action, not assumption, then like and subscribe, because this story, it isn't about noise or rank. It's about the quiet ones who wait for the moment that proves everything. It didn't start with chaos or glory, just a standard morning dispatch at Camp Rydell, a sun-baked outpost used for advanced joint force field training deep in the New Mexico desert. Recruits were stretching in formation. Officers were already barking orders, and from the back of a rust-bitten transport vent stepped Staff Sergeant Leah Cortez, boots dusty, shoulders square, face unreadable. She didn't flinch when the sun hit her worn uniform or when the whispers started. No one saluted. No one offered help with her gear. She just gave the sergeant at the logistics table a tight nod and said, "Communication support, assigned Ridge 6." That was all. The man didn't even look up. Cabins unlocked. No backup listed. Not a moment later, Private Trey Mallon, a cocky new recruit with a platinum buzz cut and a permanent smirk, leaned sideways to his buddy and muttered just loud enough, "Guess they'll let anyone in now." Didn't know the admin ladies got uniforms too. They laughed. Loudly. And just like that, Leah was marked older, unknown, quiet. She didn't correct him. Didn't glance sideways. Just adjusted the strap of her battered pack and walked across the gravel lot toward the edge of base where the comms shack stood, half forgotten and covered in blown dust. Her job was simple. On paper, monitor the comms grid during the training exercise, log activity, report interference. No live op. No live fire. Just simulated drills. But while others underestimated her, Leah had already noticed the rattling frequency bounce on the second repeater tower. She already marked a shortwave echo that shouldn't be there. And the satellite sync from HQ? 3 seconds delayed. Most would have shrugged. She logged it. She always did. In the mess hall that night, no one sat with her. Even the older officers didn't know her name. Some assumed she was transferred admin from another division. One joked she looked like a substitute teacher. But Leah didn't need to be seen. She ate because tomorrow would be long, and she never let her system run low. The next morning was all boots and sweat, rifles and bark timing calls. Recruits pushed through terrain sprints, command teams reviewed heat mapping drones, and at the very edge of it all, Leah Cortez powered up her equipment alone. She ran a manual cross-check of the terrain sensors, resynced the repeater grid by hand, and reinforced the analog override. Not because she was paranoid, but because she learned long ago that the newest systems fail the fastest when it matters. By 0930 hours, the field team was 10 clicks out, simulating recon advancement, with only Leah watching from the ridge. The channel chatterbuzzed with overconfidence, Trey laughing through protocol checks, joking that the only thing they'd face in this heat was sunburn and sandflies. Leah muted her earpiece and focused on the feed. One flicker, two. A heat bloom outside grid range. Civilian? Coyote? She keyed in a timestamp, noted wind drift, and stared harder. Then, a narrowband signal, encrypted, off-grid, not part of the drill. Her fingers hovered. She could report it through proper chain, but she already knew what would come back. Ignore. Faulty sensor. Some overlay. They always assumed glitches until someone bled. So Leah ran the trace. Then another. 5 minutes later, she'd sketched a pattern. Not one, not two, but 5 echo pings outside the map, circling slow. It wasn't part of the exercise. It wasn't a drill. She reached for the backup line, the old red handset they'd left unplugged for years. Dusty, but functional. She patched in a secure signal and calmly called it. Unknown signals. Ridge Sector Bravo Echo. Recommend full freeze and tactical hold. The response came from an officer too young to mask his annoyance. We're mid-sim. Probably residual overlay. Hold position. Don't panic the kids. Leah didn't argue. She never did. She just switched bands, verified the signal was repeating, and kept watching. What she didn't know was that in less than an hour, every digital system would short. GPS would go blind. Comms would choke. And on that ridge, alone in a rickety shack surrounded by desert and doubt, Leah Cortez would be the only one left with eyes on the field and a voice loud enough to reach the sky. It started like static, just a brief flicker, a sharp edge of silence between drone feed updates and terrain checks. But Leah Cortez knew the difference between a malfunction and an omen, and by the time the first comms tower blinked out and the GPS froze, She was already locking the ridge post into backup power. 10 miles out, in a simulated no-contact zone, a full unit of recruits and officers was caught mid-movement, trapped in a communications blackout that no one recognized until it was too late. On their maps, the enemy was digital, predictable, until the digital vanished, and real shadows moved in their place. Somewhere beyond the horizon, dust began to rise, not from wind drills or ATV patterns, but from vehicles, 3 of them, military-grade, unmarked, and closing. No one in command saw it. No drone feed captured it. But Leah did. Through an old thermal scope she'd kept stored for backup, obsolete to everyone else, irreplaceable to her, she tracked movement that didn't match the drill manifest. While officers back at base cursed the blackout and recruits joked nervously about power failure, Leah drew a breath, reached for the old handset, and rerouted again, this time bypassing local command entirely. A different voice answered, cool, professional, clipped. This is Echo Control. You've reached emergency direct. And Leah, calm as a prayer whispered in a hurricane, replied, Echo Control, this is Ridge 6. Requesting immediate satellite recon, Grid 17 Golf, hostile presence confirmed. Requesting close air support with rapid response authorization. There was a pause, long, then longer, and finally, identify and authenticate. Leah didn't flinch. She gave her full clearance. Not the one printed on her temporary orders. The one buried beneath it, tied to credentials inactive on paper, but still valid to those who knew her name. The line went silent. Then the voice returned. Target confirmation received. Birds en route. ETA 7 minutes. That's when everything changed. Because while others scrambled to reboot systems and shouted orders into dead radios, Leah took a breath, set her watch, and called the field, manually, broadcasting on a frequency so old it wasn't even listed in the training handbook anymore. This is Ridge 6. You are not in a drill. Confirm hostile approach, Grid 17 Golf. Stay low. Lockdown. Air cover is inbound. Her voice crackled into static, then silence. Then panic. On the ground, Private Trey Mallon, who laughed at her that morning, was now flat on his stomach behind a low ridge, watching figures advance through the brush with real weapons and no identifying patches. One recruit whispered, "Are we being tested?" Another screamed when a round cracked past her helmet. It wasn't a test. It was a breach. Real. Coordinated. Deliberate. And command? Still blind. Still slow. Still assuming Leah was overreacting. But up on the ridge, Leah didn't care what they thought anymore. She was steady. Trained. Tracked. She mapped every movement from the ridge with grease pencil markings on laminated grid sheets. It was the way she'd done it overseas. Before the injury. Before the reassignment. Before the silence. Then, like judgment falling to the clouds, the sound of incoming rotors split the sky. 3 fast movers, 2 Apaches, 1 Guardian drone, streaked across the horizon, locking targets based on Leah's coordinates alone. They painted the ground with precision strikes, sending the attackers scattering, the sand erupting in precise fire bursts, nowhere near the trainees but close enough to end the threat before it ever touched them. The entire ground unit froze, stunned. Radios flared back online. Now the command center was waking up. Frantic chatter, scrambling response teams, too late to stop what had already happened, but not too late to realize who had stopped it first. At base, officers demanded to know who authorized the strike, who bypassed protocol, who called in Echo Control without clearance. And then someone said her name, quietly, almost unsure. Cortez? The comms tech. But Leah was already on foot. She left the shack once the sky turned safe again, boots crunching over desert grit as she made her way down toward the returning unit. She didn't carry a weapon, just a notepad, her old watch, and a face that hadn't changed when people laughed or when bullets flew. Trey saw her first. His hands were still shaking, his uniform streaked with dust. When she approached, he tried to speak, but the words didn't come. So Leah just looked at him and said, "You need to recheck your comms training. You were on the wrong frequency." And then she kept walking, not out of arrogance, out of muscle memory, because she hadn't done it to be seen. She had done it because they were hers, even if they didn't know it yet. And miles above them, on satellite logs and encrypted transcripts, her name, Staff Sergeant L. Cortez, was being typed again after years of silence, followed by a phrase no one on base could delete: "Target neutralization successful." Directed by Field Level JDC. Authorization verified. They didn't hold a ceremony, because at places like Camp Rydell, Acknowledgement only comes when it can't be avoided. And by the time leadership pieced together the full chain of events, Leah Cortez had already gone back to her corner of the outpost, quietly repacking the same tools they'd once laughed at, as if none of it had happened. But it had, and now even the ones who hadn't seen the sky split open could feel the shift. The officers who dismissed her were reviewing satellite logs they couldn't explain, seeing her name listed next to Live Tactical Air Command, cross-referenced with credentials they didn't even know still existed. The phrase, former JTAC, started circulating in whispers. Joint Terminal Attack Controller. One of the most elite, most demanding, most dangerous positions in combat coordination. You don't just earn that title, you survive it. And Leah? She hadn't just survived it. She had rewritten the close air doctrine for mountainous terrain after a tour that left half her unit buried and the other half alive because she refused to call off air cover when the wind turned. But no one at Rydell had known that. Not Trey. Not the officer who handed her the shack key without looking up. Not the two senior instructors who barely noticed her name on the roster. Because she didn't tell them. She wasn't there for credit. She was there to listen, watch, support. Until the moment came when support became command, and she stepped into it not with a shout, but with a frequency code and her own steady breath. By nightfall, every comms device on base was resynced, every channel scrubbed, every report filed, and still, she hadn't said a word about what she'd done. No demands. No, I told you so. Just silence. But silence has weight, especially when the ones who dismissed you have to sit across from command and explain why a non-commissioned support specialist saved 40 lives while they were still rebooting laptops. By morning, the base was humming, but differently now. Tighter, tenser. A meeting was called, unscheduled, all hands mandatory, in the operations hall, the kind of summons that makes even senior staff check their uniforms twice. The room filled slowly. Instructors, trainees, officers, techs. Some whispering, others staring down their boots. And then the door opened. A woman in full dress uniform walked in. Not Leah. Brigadier General Ava Ransom, Regional Command. The room straightened without a word. She didn't take the podium. She didn't clear her throat. She simply said, "Where is Staff Sergeant Leah Cortez?" And from the back of the room, someone stood. Slowly. Reluctantly. Not timid. Just prepared for the spotlight to land without ceremony. Leah stepped forward. Her uniform simple, unadorned except for one patch on her shoulder, weathered, faint, but unmistakable. The JTAC insignia. The general nodded once and gestured her to stand beside her, not behind. And then she turned to the room. Yesterday, this base experienced a systems failure that would have left every one of you blind, exposed, and unarmed had it not been for one person. She paused, letting the silence expand. Air support was not called by command. It was not authorized through standard chain. It was not initiated by instructors. It was called in by someone you didn't even think deserved a seat in your mess hall. No one moved. No one blinked. Trey Mallon was frozen in place, jaw tight, face drained. Staff Sergeant Cortez, General Ransom continued, has over 15 years of field experience. She led forward air control in 3 combat zones. She trained half the current operational JTACs in the Pacific Theater. And she's the reason none of you are writing casualty reports right now. Whispers rippled. The kind that don't carry mockery, just realization. When your radios went silent, Ransom said, her voice harder now. She was the one voice still on the air. And none of you were listening. Her eyes swept the room. So here's what's going to change. And change it did. The next 2 days were rewired around Leah's presence. Not with fanfare, but with urgency. She wasn't given a plaque. She was given a seat in command briefings. She didn't ask for rank reinstatement. They offered it. And she declined. "I don't want my old title back," she said. "I want your new recruits trained better." So they listened. For the first time, they listened. She rewrote the training syllabus for emergency field comms. She led 2 private drills in off-grid navigation. She made Trey Mallon stand up and explain why having the right frequency saved his unit. He did, with a voice that cracked once. She let it. The moment passed. The lesson didn't. That weekend, someone changed the call sign on Ridge SIXS Outpost Shack. Quietly. No announcement. Just a new placard. Cortez Station, first in, last voice. A few of the recruits started stopping by, asking questions. One asked if she'd ever been scared. She nodded once. You always are. But fear doesn't cancel training. It just sharpens it. Someone else asked why she came back. She paused, then said, because someday, you'll need someone steady. Not loud, not famous, just steady. And when she said that, she wasn't speaking to the trainees. She was speaking to the system that had buried her in silence and assumed she'd stay buried. She hadn't. She didn't. And the next time someone said she didn't belong, they said it differently. Like a question, not a sneer. Because Leah Cortez didn't prove them wrong with medals or speeches. She did it by saving them, then staying anyway. And long after she left Camp Rydell, that shack on the ridge still held her legacy. Not in decorations, but in the echo of her voice calling through static when no one else had signal. And in the weight of respect earned the hardest way there is. Not by shouting, but by showing up, waiting, watching, and when the sky needed a name to answer to, she gave them hers.